We invite all feedback regarding our services and our projects, and I want to thank you again for your interest in joining us here this evening. I'd like to recognize a few people that we've got in the audience this evening. We've got Mayor of Waterloo, Mayor Jakubowski at the back. Close. City Councillor Vietz and Regional Councillor Lorenz. Before we begin, I want to talk a little bit about safety, and safety is our first priority. And we'd like to review with everyone in here what to do in the event of an emergency. We begin every meeting at Metrolinx with a safety briefing, just so that in the event of an incident, we know how to take care of folks, or if you have to evacuate a particular facility, we know how to evacuate very safely. So in terms of the facility here that we've got here at Computech, we've got fire alarms. It's going to be a loud, constant ring, and we're going to proceed to the nearest emergency exit, which is out the way we came in here and down the stairs. And where we're going to gather is at the corner of Charles Street and Victoria. So you can see here, we're up here in the corner, and we'd be going down to this corner here. That's where we'd all gather to make sure that we're all safe together. First aid, there's a first aid kit located in the kitchenette area. There's an AED, a defibrillator in the hallway that leads to the washroom. There's a fire extinguisher in both the kitchenette, which is the dishwashing area, and the hallway leading toward the washroom. And we've got a few other things that we always make sure that we identify people in advance so that we know who's going to do what. So Peter Bailey, my colleague at the back, Peter's going to wave in the event of an emergency. Peter's going to call 911. Mark Childs is our designated first aider here this evening. Georgina Collymore will escort the emergency services and first responders. Where's Georgina? Well, she's downstairs. Well, so she'll escort the emergency responders if we need her. And we typically would sort of say, what's the sort of head count? But more importantly, what we'd invite you to do is just please take a look to your left, to your right, to identify the person to your left and your right. So in the event if we have to evacuate and we have to go downstairs and outside, we want to make sure that you can sort of say, hey, so-and-so was beside me, and want to make sure that they're safe. Oh, and here's the our rest of our team coming with us. But as they're getting settled, I'm going to talk about the format and expectations that we've got for this evening's event. Before I do that, Mark, would you like to tell us, we also do what we call a safety moment. And so that's where we invite folks to share a little bit an issue in their either professional life or their personal life about safety, just so that we can continue to reiterate the importance of safety within our organization.
But this will make it a lot easier. So I just wanted to sort of bring first aid very much front and center with you all. You're probably wondering why the head of marketing is up here talking about safety, and possibly even why I'm your designated first aider. I'm a relatively new member of the Metrolinx team, chalking up almost 9 months now. A couple of months in to my tenure in the late part of the summer, I had the opportunity, as is the case with all of our employees, to go through first aid training. And many of you, like myself, potentially may have done first aid training when you were in your teens or your 20s. I'm definitely not that age anymore. But I had a situation on February the 14th, Valentine's Day. I happened to be grabbing a coffee at the Up Express platform at Union Station. And I was sitting down about to take this first sip of my morning coffee, and I noticed that a passenger was being helped off of one of our Up Express trains by a fellow passenger, and sat her down at the table next to me. Her back was to me, but she was bundled up for the winter. And the passenger who helped her to the table said, I hope you'll be okay. Instinctively, I would say from the training that I'd had in late summer, instinctively I knew to get up and go talk to this individual. And I won't belabor this conversation and this story, because obviously it's a bit of a private one, but this individual was having a very severe panic attack. And I spent the next 45 minutes with her, with transit safety, and ultimately with EMS, to help her through what could have been quite a grave situation. So I just wanted to share with you that safety is our absolute priority for our customers as we travel together each and every day. I will tell you that there is a rather good story ending to this sharing with you. I actually received a text yesterday from the individual that I helped, who took a moment out of her schedule just to share with me the impact that I had being there with her at a time that she needed it. I have to tell you, it's one of those experiences that you have that leaves a lasting impression. So I would just say, if you have the opportunity to think about and potentially even take refreshed first aid training, I would say I would encourage you to do it, because with that confidence comes the ability, hopefully, to help someone should they have a time of need. So thank you.
Thanks, Mark. So in terms of the format that we've got for this evening's event, this event has been designed to allow for as many opportunities for questions and feedback as possible. For those not able to join us here this evening, there was an opportunity to submit questions in advance, and the online community helped us prioritize those questions that we're going to answer here this evening. For those of you in the room, we'd invite you to ask questions. We've got a microphone set up at the back, and you can begin to queue up there at any particular point in time. And we'd ask you to form a line and direct your questions to the panel when I call upon you. Just take a couple of minutes to ask your question. The shorter you can be, the briefer you can be, the more questions and answers we'll get to, which is terrific. And then for those viewing online, our online moderators at the back will collect your questions and project them onto the screen. If we're not able to answer your question, we will be here stay a little bit later after the end of the meeting. We're happy to answer questions that you've got then, or you can submit them to us as well through our online engagement tool. We're going to rotate through that sort of cycle. We're going to take questions from the room. We're going to take questions that were asked online, and we'll take questions on our live stream. We've got 1.5 hours for the event, so we're going to take as many questions as possible. And the one thing we sort of say is off the bat is that all the questions we take down, we're going to answer them all fully here this evening, and as the ones we don't get to, the ones that are submitted, and all will be posted online within the next couple of weeks. We aim to make this as productive a session as possible. We're committed to hearing your feedback and treating you with respect, and we trust that you'll do the same. I would now like to introduce our President and CEO, Phil Verster. Phil's going to introduce himself and the rest of the Metrolinx panel here today.
So first of all, thank you very much for being here this evening. What Jamie didn't say or fully explain is this is our fourth public Ask Metrolinx session. We hold them on a cycle. We started mid last year. We hold one every 2 months or so. And it's part of our drive to give communities an opportunity to talk to us directly. And the first 3 we did in Toronto, and we are now out in the region. You're the first region we're coming to, and it's great to be here. And it's good to be able to answer your questions firsthand. I think it's really important. It's important for us as an organization to actually come out to the regions and ask your questions firsthand. And I know the big questions tonight's going to be, when are we getting more services? And I'm looking forward to that conversation. It's going to be lively and exciting, so we're all looking forward to that. But hopefully after tonight, at least you'll understand where we're coming from and what it is we do and what the indicative time frame is. And the thought I'm going to leave with you is the services you're going to get in any. We're doing everything to get it in as soon as possible, and you get it in long before the original promise date, which was 2025 or 2026. But let's leave that for when that question comes. The point, though, is big questions like that needs to be answered in the community, and that's why we're here tonight. And so thank you very much for having us. I would like each of the members of my team, and we've got many, I've got my whole team here to answer the question, but Leslie, Greg, and Matt will introduce themselves. We normally have most of the questions come to the 4 of us, so we normally divide it up between us. But we also have Jennifer, we've got Fawad, we've got Heather, we've got Mark and Helen. The rest of my top team is here as well, and obviously Jamie. So any questions you have, don't hesitate. Ask any questions. It's all up for grabs tonight. Thank you very much. Leslie.
Hello. Good evening. My name is Leslie Wu. I'm the Chief Planning and Development Officer at Metrolinx.
My name is Greg Percy. I'm Chief Operating Officer at Metrolinx.
My name is Matt Clark. I'm the Chief Capital Officer at Metrolinx.
So Peter, do you want to bring the first question up on the screen? So this was one of our top 10 questions in this. We understand that when you're running trains and running them inside communities, that issues of noise are of concern to the community. So noise mitigation for residents on the Kitchener corridor. So basically the questioner here, Nick, is asking what is the long-term plan for facilities on the Kitchener corridor, and how does Metrolinx plan to mitigate noise and other impacts to residents on the Kitchener corridor? Specifically, when will temporary facilities such as the layover between Park and King Streets be closed or upgraded to minimize the impact on adjacent residential properties? The siding was presented to the community as temporary in 2010, and Metrolinx has not provided an updated long-term plan for any noise mitigation. So I think we sort of thought that Greg might be best to answer that.
So thank you for the question. That's a very good question. There's no question the layover site is embedded in the community. There's what we call residential adjacency, which becomes really important to the community. So as we add more service, we are going to need to lay over, which layover means we leave our trains here at night, we plug them in so they have some climate control, easier to start in the morning. So we are going to have to do more of that. Having said that, at other meetings we had today, I did hear that there are concerns about noise. So what I will ask my team to do is take a closer look at the noise from the startup of the trains, how early they start up, that kind of thing. Because there's no reason we should be starting up an hour and a half before the first train leaves. So we've done this in other communities where we've tightened the startup period to the actual departure times, and that became very welcome by the community. So I will move forward on that with my team to make sure that we are lessening the impact we have on the community in terms of use of that layover site. But I don't want to mislead, and as we do add more service, we will be laying over more trains. I understand there has been some engagement already between our team and some local community folks, and I think that conversation needs to continue, and we'll do what we can to mitigate the noise.
Okay. Great, thanks very much. Sir, at the mic, if you could just tell us your name and ask your question.
Yeah, it's Ron Bowman. I want to make two comments and then one quick question. The comments are, I spent a number of years in Canadian Pacific's head office in Calgary, and I was the safety specialist for operations for Canada and U.S. operations. And this is the first public meeting I've gone to with a proper safety briefing, so I want to give you kudos for that.
Thank you very much.
The other safety issue is that if anybody here doesn't realize it, railway property is private property, and throughout my career, I've been involved in the operation of trains that have killed 5 people trespassing on tracks. So keep off the tracks. And I think you're affected by that today by the sound of things. Now my question is, what's the excuse for not having Cambridge GO service now? And remember that I worked for nearly 40 years for CP, so you can't give me the standard answer. Oh, I want to preface that with one thing too. It seems to me...
It's nice you did that one so gently.
I know. Well, I've got to make it even less soft. But anyway, I get the feeling here that local media and local politicians, regional politicians, don't realize that Cambridge is part of Waterloo region. So
Yeah.
now to the question.
Right. First of all, thank you very much
Well,
for
you're
that.
welcome.
Your two safety comments in the beginning is very appropriate. Give everyone a sense. I traveled up in the GO service and I spent time on the train talking to customers, but we had 2 fatalities on our railway today, 2 on one day, and I don't think that's happened recently, and it's very tragic, but that's where we are. I'm going to use your question, if that's acceptable to you, to just talk about the Kitchener service, and I'm sure there'll be a follow-up question about the Kitchener service, and then also talk about the Cambridge service.
Sure.
So I'd like to start with the Kitchener service. A year and a half ago, when I joined Metrolinx, there was sort of what I call a big bang solution, which was what's called the freight bypass that had to be built, which is going to be between $4.5 and $5.5 billion. There's going to be sort of an exchange of that given to CN, and then the section of track that we've got between Bramalea and Georgetown was going to be given to us, and only when we've got that can we start spending. So first build the freight bypass. That's going to take some people said 5 years. Freight bypass was going to be a huge construction project. That was going to take, I would say, 6 or 7 years. By 2025-ish, we'd be able to take over the Bramalea to Georgetown section, then start to make adjustments to that. The timeline was something really significant. And something I'd like everyone in the room to understand is the really good partnership we have with CN. The Bramalea to Georgetown section of track is owned by CN, and we've negotiated with CN an alternative way to use capacity which we will build on that corridor, even though the corridor is owned by them. And we've already built some of that. And for a large part of last year, we negotiated the details of how additional capacity can be added, which means that we don't have to build the freight bypass to get services to Kitchener, and we can get the services to Kitchener sooner than 2025 plus years thereafter. And we didn't do it well in January, but we've started to add services in January, and we've recovered that, and we've learned from that. And we obviously tonight, and as I did earlier today on the radio as well, hold up our hands and say, look, we could have done that better. And we learn lessons from that, and we will continue to learn lessons. But here's the positive thing, and I know everyone in Kitchener wants services quicker. I've made it from 18 months ago, made it one of my 3 highest objectives is to get Kitchener services sooner. We are now in a stage where there's quite a lot of work that must be done at Georgetown and at the different stations and on parts of the track on Georgetown to Kitchener. We want to take the single line sections and create passing loops so that we can start to run trains past each other and have the morning inbound service that I think so many people in Kitchener want. Why this is important is that in November last year, we started with a $75 million contract to start the investment on what we call the Georgetown to Kitchener section. So that work is starting. The work on Georgetown is 30% through design. We'll be placing a contract by the end of this year and get that work completed somewhere during next year. And where we in January had a first step increase, we intend in the next year to have further increases in the service, which is therefore step-by-step increases. The big bottleneck for us remains Georgetown, because Georgetown is where the CN track sort of bends from the south into the eastern direction, and where we take over the part of the track up to Kitchener. And so the exciting thing for us is that we don't have to wait till 2025. And tonight, when you guys feel like throwing tomatoes at us about dates and stuff like that, just keep in mind, there was never any real commitment given on when exactly things were going to start running. You were just told somewhere in 2025. Now, we're telling you that we are now increasing services. We've done the first increase. We had 4 trains in the peak. We now have 5. We intend to do more. I prefer to say we're going to do more somewhere in the next couple of months or in the next within the next year or so, because this is a ministerial announcement and it won't be wise for me to scoop a minister's announcement. So the minister will come and say when it is, but you can take comfort from this meeting that more services are coming within this period, within the next the next year-ish. I think I've already been too specific. But there'll be more services, and it's very dependent on a piece of work at Georgetown which completes next year, which somewhere after that piece of work completes next year allows us to do quite a lot more after that. And the message here is about growth in services. And I'm one of those very old-fashioned people that don't believe in big bang, jam tomorrow, jam 2025 answers. I'd rather do smaller steps, do them regularly, and grow the service as we go along. Now to get to Cambridge. So, after all of that difficulty to get to Kitchener, you want to go to Cambridge as well.
Well, I mean, listen, I realize there's two options for Cambridge. One is CP, which we keep
Yes.
hearing fantastic stories about capacity,
Yes.
which are nonsense. But the other one is the Fergus Spur, if there was a study afoot there. And that
Okay.
does give you ownership.
So we've got a joint study that we're doing with the region of Waterloo to look at it's called the old Fergus line. Yeah. So we've got that study going. What these studies are really important for is that wherever there are lines, it's possible to run trains. However, we have a very strict sort of business case approach where if there's going to be demand, what's the demand? What's the cost? What's the longer term demand?
Well, studies prove that more people went from Cambridge to the GTA than Kitchener Waterloo combined a number of years ago.
So all of that will come out of that business case analysis that we're doing. So what we are saying is one of the things that is crucial for transit planning is that our business case methodology must be really solid. And the business case methodology must take into all of the considerations of local transit-oriented development impact. So therefore, what's the impact on possible transit-oriented development? What's the impact on the economy, local economy? To what extent will we move people? How does it affect end destinations and start destinations? What's the extent of the ridership? And then what's the cost to reinstate lines and stuff like that? And I've not seen the progress with that Fergus line study, but when that's completed, I know it's in situ. When it's completed, we will put that into our total list of projects. And we've got a list of projects for the Greater Golden Horseshoe. As you can imagine, each one of them has what we call a benefit-cost ratio with it. So what's the value of the benefits against the value of the costs? And that's normally a ratio. If that ratio is 2 to 1, it means for every dollar you put in for cost, you get $2 of benefits. So, and there's a list of is it around 75 projects like that already. And this one would fit on that list as well. And I think it's then what we do with those lists, we present it to the minister and say, Minister, we Metrolinx don't make the decisions. We just do the analysis. There's a detailed study around this that backs up what the case is for the service to Cambridge. And this is what the benefit-cost ratio is. One more thought. I think if you just look at the Cambridge service without getting the Kitchener service to run at full tilt, at full capacity, it'll sway the costs sort of in a way it shouldn't. I think when you have and this is how the network works, if you have the service to run all the way to Kitchener, I think it'll benefit the business case for Cambridge.
Well, it may. I don't think people will drive from that east end of Cambridge up to the Kitchener line. They'll go to Melton like they've always done. The fact of the matter is, I just wanted an answer to why we don't have it. Because the capacity's there, the track is signalized, it's good for 60 miles an hour, and there's tons of space on the track for in and out trains. So what this is you're going to build it and they will come on the Kitchener line, and those that are workday commuting back and forth to Cambridge, they can, tough it out on the bus or their car or whatever. That's what I see as the distinction here.
Yeah, that's not.
Well, all day is getting more preference in Cambridge basic commute, weekday service. That's the way I see it. So.
Yeah. So clearly we can all look at it our own way, and I just want to point out that's not exactly what I said. What I said is that with business case development, we have a business case that justifies the development of the Kitchener line, and we are investing in the Kitchener line accordingly.
I get that.
And that's really important to understand. And so by that same rigor, we're not picking favorites out of individual routes. We're doing a fact-based approach which says this is the economic benefits, this is the cost of investment. And then we go to the elected decision makers and say, right, these are the choices. And we're going to follow exactly the same rigor with Cambridge.
Yeah, I don't think it's ever been explored seriously. That's my point.
Oh, yeah, and we do.
Yeah.
Take that away, please, if I could.
Yeah.
This time around, we're doing it seriously.
I'm
hope
going
so.
to go to the next question.
Thank you for your question,
That's
sir.
good. Sir?
Yes, my name is Robert McLean, and I also live in Cambridge, which at last time I looked is in the region of Waterloo. We're not talking about using the Fergus sub to hook up to the Kitchener line. What we're talking about here, as far as GO train service to Cambridge is concerned, is extending the Melton Line into Cambridge. The Melton Line is 6 miles shorter than the line into Kitchener, and it's a faster line. A trip from Waterloo region into Toronto can be made in an hour over that Melton Line. And we are wondering why Metrolinx has not considered extending the Melton train into Cambridge when they are investigating possibilities of more of a GO service.
That's a great question as well. So, challenge here is the Melton Line is not ours. So, the Melton Line is CP's main line through to Chicago. So, it's not our line.
Okay.
And so what that means really is we sort of, in a sense, very often with the freight companies, and again, CP are close colleagues of us, so what I'm going to say now is not derogatory, but we sort of sometimes unwelcome visitors on their line. And so if we want to run more services, so currently we run 10 services, very busy, out in the morning and back in the evening. And we're having real difficulty convincing them to increase those number of services. Because, as you can imagine, it's their line, so it's their capacity, it's their main corridor into the States, and it's very difficult to add more services. So, the reason why we have therefore taken a longer route is we've got more ownership of track on the Kitchener line and then swinging south towards Cambridge. So that's the reason. Now, we are similar to the negotiations with CN. We are working with CP to see what's possible on the Melton Line. But that's the reason, sir.
But there are negotiations ongoing, that there is some optimism that at one stage of the game there may be an extension of the Melton train into Waterloo region?
I'll be perfectly honest with you. Whatever capacity we can eke out of the Melton Line would probably be consumed on the existing Melton services because there's such huge demand. We'd have to look at what's possible and see how much leeway they give us. But most likely, a service pattern around the Kitchener line would probably be the most likely. But that's just me sort of saying from looking at the network, from what I think is possible.
It's most unfortunate that these negotiations are the hindrance in this particular case, because if they were not in place, service between Waterloo region and Toronto could be accomplished in less than an hour.
It is about how much money we've got in our pocket. You follow? If there's no money, there's not enough money in the world, I would say, and I say this tongue-in-cheek, to state how important that line is to CP. There's no money in the world that CP would forego to just concede additional capacity in that corridor.
Oh, absolutely. You could get them to bend. All they want is the taxpayers to improve their infrastructure.
Okay, sir.
It's okay. No, it's okay. It's great.
Yeah.
Thank you. We appreciate that feedback. But it's at least take away the following. Cambridge is on the railway map, and we're trying to figure out where it fits.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
I'm going to take one more question from the audience, and then we'll go out to online after that.
Okay. My name's Alex Kuchler. First, I wanted to just comment saying I really appreciate earlier in the year you guys admitted your mistake with the Kitchener Line service, and you went out, Phil. You even made like a video on like expressing your apologies to the Kitchener Line customers. I really appreciate that. That's one way to help rebuild the trust after such a unfortunate service change, and I really appreciate that. As
we learn.
Yeah. To change topics here slightly, I would like to talk about bus service in instead. Like right now, two-way all-day-go service is going to be quite a few years away, and I understand that. However, we do have bus service going between, we have an express bus service going between Kitchener and Bramley during the weekday. That does help out a bit with cutting down the length of time it takes to get to Toronto, but that only runs during the week. I was wondering if there's any plans to either extend that to like for the weekend or add like another service to say going between Waterloo Region and even the 407 bus terminal to utilize that more often.
So I'll take that one. Yeah, we're willing to take a look at that. We did add in the service on the 401 into Bramley to relieve pressure, so it is achieving that. But we will take a look at whether that's doable for weekends as well, and we'll package that with conversations we're having on rail. So we'll take a look at that package offering for weekend service.
Mark, did you want to add a couple?
Mark?
Mark? Here you go.
Take the mic.
You need to use the mic.
I think I got a good voice, but anyway. So just to give you a little bit of a context, within my team, I do have a full analytics team, and we are now more thoroughly than I think ever analyzing routes, whether they be rail or whether they be buses. I actually took bus 30 today to get here, so I'm actually now very familiar with the bus, and we're always looking at options to increase service, but also kind of make sure that our routes are serving customers. So I would say to you, we'll definitely take that one back. It's something that I flagged. The bus 30 route is performing very, very strongly for us, and I think there's definitely an opportunity for us to look at it.
Yeah, okay. It's perfect because like I'd like to be able to go to Toronto like on the weekend just to whenever, not have to worry about is it going to take 3 hours just to get back or even 2? It's like it'd be nice to.
And just like you, one of the things that we're doing with the analytics, we're not just looking at numbers, we're actually trying to better understand who our customers are and why they're traveling. And what you've just described there is something we call trip purposes, why people take a train or a bus, and definitely coming into the city of Toronto, but also coming back the other way for events and is a major, major driver for sure.
All right, thank you.
So we're about a third of the way through our event. For those of you who've just joined us in the audience or online, thank you for joining the Management Town Hall of Metrolinx. Peter, we've got some people watching online who can ask a question. So this is coming from our live stream, and it's coming from Leo Chan. I'll read this out. If money and track ownership were not an issue, what would the ideal Kitchener GO corridor look like?
Yeah, so that's a good question. The ideal corridor would have more double track sections in it. Probably at Georgetown or just before Georgetown, we'd have a grade separation, which is basically a flyover. If I draw it out like this, if this is the track out to Kitchener, the CN track comes up at Georgetown over here, and then run around this corridor. So we are currently on the southern part of the corridor. We want to fly over to the northern part of the corridor without affecting freight trains come through. So up to Bramley, we've got good track. Up to Mount Pleasant, we've invested in a whole dedicated third track for GO. If we have a flyover between Mount Pleasant and Georgetown, that would separate us from freight. And then from Georgetown all the way to Kitchener, what we should have is more double track sections. Our plan currently to get those double track sections is to, in stations, build. So for example, at Georgetown, in order to get more services through Georgetown, we're going to build 2 island platforms, therefore create more platforms on the which was sort of the southern part of the station alignment. And for all of the stations from Georgetown onwards, Acton, Guelph and the like, is to create platforms on both sides of the track that allows us to therefore pass trains in the stations and then also pass trains outside of the stations on selected piece of track. Because what you get then is that you get trains that can pass each other, you can run a higher frequency service. So we don't live perfectly in the world if money and track ownership were not an issue. So while it's an interesting question that Leo asks, just looking at it practically, this is what we are going to do because we do have those constraints. So the practical things we have to do is going to be exactly what I've just explained.
Maybe Phil, I can add another sort of piece to the puzzle. Even between Mount Pleasant and Kitchener, there are quite a number of level crossings. So if we were able to address some of those, we could get higher speeds. The other thing that I think that the corridor would benefit from in terms of more riders is more development in and around the stations. The ability to have people right in close proximity to our corridor in jobs, living. I think those would be kind of the vision for the corridor.
Okay. Thanks, Leslie. Next question for the mic, sir.
Hi, I'm Ian McLean, President and CEO of the Greater Kitchener-Waterloo Chamber of Commerce, also chair of the Connect the Corridor Coalition. Looking
Good
forward
to see you, Ian.
Good to see you.
My apologies, I couldn't see you this afternoon. I was called into a cabinet meeting.
We had a great discussion with your team, and I think one of the things I wanted to highlight is the coalition, as I said this afternoon.
Yeah.
It is not just here; it's from Toronto right through the corridor. I see friends from Brampton and other places right through. Jan De Silva and I work together on the Innovation Corridor Coalition. And a lot of what we're talking about is not only moving people, but moving goods and services as well. So one of the issues that came up was in the economic analysis and the analysis, business case, if you will, some of the opportunity costs that are probably not being calculated right now. And we committed to getting some of that information to your team. But I wanted to discuss how those opportunity costs, whether you think those are appropriate to be calculated. As an example, we know that we can, Google and others can work anywhere in the world. So they have to make a choice to be either here or in this corridor. And this service is so essential to that. So as you get to the decision making, taking the information to the minister, where will that fit into the economic case? Because right now it's not reflected in the study that was released not too long ago.
Yeah, so Ian, let's just separate the two things out. There's a business case for extensions, and that is the extension to Niagara, then the extension to Kitchener, and the extension to Bowmanville, which is not included in the business case that's presented, which is why I was held back today, because I had to go to Cabinet to just talk them through the business case for the GO expansion. However, the fact that the extensions aren't in the business case doesn't mean that we're not unlocking the value of running more services. Currently, we have just in September last year agreed with CN what we call minimal infrastructure required that's sufficient. Now, minimal infrastructure is still a lot of infrastructure that is sufficient to implement the two-way all-day service to Kitchener as well as to Niagara. Those two lines are sort of our critical priorities because the lines exist already. And so the business case that you refer to, that you say, well, why is it not on the cards anymore? And maybe we've not explained that well enough, and I apologize for that. That is only if we need to do more. And currently, we're doing everything. We took possession of the Guelph sub in October of last year, and the contracts to do the 75 million of work to speed up running between Georgetown. I was on the train tonight, and and again, every time I do that part of the journey, I sense how slow it is. I think the team says I mustn't offer more than 10 minutes, but I can tell you now we're going to squeak out more than 10 minutes journey time saving. We're going to do everything to get more out of it. But there's a real opportunity to speed up that journey time. That investment is happening. That money is being spent now. The development of the Georgetown solution is happening. Nothing is holding it up. So I intend to be in a place where we will be moving really rapidly, as quickly as possible, to keep on ramping and increasing services. You don't have to make the case to us about there's a business case behind it. We know the business case is strong. There's nothing that we are not doing to speed up implementation. The current business case that we have that gives us that the current justification that's serving in front of Treasury Board this week is sufficient for us to do the initial works that we're doing now, and it covers that well.
Okay.
Very
Ian,
good.
thanks for your question. Next question.
Hi, James Smith, and I'm from Guelph. And I'd like to first say kudos for doing this. I appreciate it, and coming out to the region is very good. And I appreciate some of the improvements to the website. I'd still like the website to be able to work with Safari. It doesn't seem to work very well with Safari, so that is one of my pet peeves with your
It works okay with my Safari.
pardon me, the Safari browser.
That's what I
Yeah.
say. I have
Yeah.
a Safari browser. And
It's
seems-
just I find when I'm typing in a station, because I don't go to the same station every time.
Email us what's not working,
Okay.
where the kinks are, and we'll look into that.
Absolutely. My question is about Guelph and the service between Guelph, Kitchener, Waterloo, and Toronto. It could use a lot of improvement. I think laying the groundwork for two-way all-day go service on the Kitchener line is improved service between Kitchener, Waterloo, and Guelph. That can be bus with on Highway 7 rather than having to go all the way down to the 401 and then back up. As well, between Guelph and the lower 905 and the GTA. Right now, there is no service between Guelph and Hamilton. I have colleagues that teach at both universities who have to drive. When I go into the city of Toronto, I find the most efficient way is to drive to Aldershot if I can find parking. Were there a GO bus that made that trip, the growing area of Waterdown would be served very well on Highway 6 and would tend to relieve some of that parking pressure into Waterdown. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on improving Guelph service.
So we do take a look at the corridors we don't serve as much as the ones we do. And we look for opportunities to add new service if there's a reasonable return on investment in doing so.
Sure.
And to connect buses, we run, for context, we run about 2,500 bus trips a day across our network. And we would carefully add more as long as they connect to others and they make good business sense because we're using your tax dollar. So we can look at those. I'm pretty sure we have looked at those already, and we would have put new bus service in if there had been enough ridership to justify. We don't like to run buses half full. We like to run them with as many people in seats as possible. But I'm happy to take that back and take another look at it with my bus team.
Because as you know, the bus from Guelph goes ultimately into the city of Toronto. But I think there's a big bubble of potential riders in Waterdown. So I'd make the case that running from Guelph to Waterdown into Aldershot would allow connectivity both to the city of Hamilton and the city of Toronto.
And if that proves to be true, by all means, we take a serious look at it.
So I thought I'd throw it out there and get your
Can I
kick at
ask?
it. Sure.
It's ideas like that which sometimes have not really landed well with our planners. Please take the liberty and just pen Greg a short email with your thoughts about what stops will work. And that gives a frame of reference for us to follow up on.
Awesome.
It's a great suggestion. We get great suggestions from people like this all the time.
Thanks
Much
for your help.
appreciate it.
Just wanted to say that a lot of folks are standing in the back, and there are some seats at the front, or have a look around if you want to sit down. There are seats available. Okay. Peter, I'm going to go one more question from the audience here, and then we'll pop back onto the online perhaps.
Actually, I have two really quick questions about Presto. First one, are there any plans to install the Presto self-serve machines at more of the intermodal terminals in KW, such as the Sportsville Terminal, the Charles Terminal, or even the future University of Waterloo Terminal? And also, do you guys have any updates on the talks with Apple regarding Presto and Apple Pay?
Oh, that's a good question.
I would really love to pay with my watch.
Yeah.
Thank you for raising that question. With respect to self-service, actually we're looking...
This is forward, by the way. This is forward.
Thank you, Phil. Maybe perhaps I can do a little introduction. By the way, the folks that don't know me, I'm Fawad Ibrahimi, the Vice President for Operation within Presto. With respect of your first question on a self-service devices, we are actually exploring and looking the opportunity of standardizing all our self-service kiosks across the region. That is one of the initiatives we're going to look in over next year, just to provide kind of consistent customer experience. And if you look at right now, we have a various type of machine on a Go Transit and TTC and other network on that. So that is one of the initiatives we're going to look into that next year, and of course, opportunity where we can extend on that. With respect of Apple Pay, so that's an interesting question. Yes, we are continue pursuing that option. You may be aware we just launched our mobile app that provides a lot of opportunity, especially if you have an Android version like me. It's instant load and you can pay on with various options. However, you're still not able to tap on with your phone on the readers. And so we'll continue exploring that option, so stay tuned.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Fouad. Thanks for that. Peter, do you have a question? So this is one of our top 10 questions that came in prior to the event this evening. So this is dealing with Express Kitchener-Toronto weekend service. So the question is coming in from Dunkalunk. Says that there's a latent demand not being met by the current 3-hour all-stop trips on Saturday and Sunday. Is there any chance of extending the operating hours of Route 30 train bus or running express trips to Square One?
So, Jamie, I feel like Dunkalunk came and asked us that question already.
Or we've answered it.
Oh, we've answered.
Yeah. Just the one observation would be, if we must prioritize service expansion, we typically prioritize the weekdays first. Try, because that's where the big demand is, and that's also where the biggest impact is. However, once we've invested in all of the rolling stock, as we do currently, and all of the infrastructure, it's a missed opportunity to not do something over the weekends as well. It's just if the ridership is there and it holds up that earlier questions the other two gentlemen asked were really pertinent questions, because it's all about whether demand is there. But we'll typically start with weekdays and then move to weekends.
Great, thank you. Sir, next question from the mic.
Sure. Good evening, my name is Tyson Moore, and I have a question about open data and real-time bus location information. We've had real-time train location. It's been open, it's been accessible through GoTracker for a long time. In late 2016, I think, the Transit app folks in Montreal, who are great, were the first ones to integrate real-time GoBus information into their platform. And in the ensuing 2.5 years, really the only progress that's been made on that is now there's the SMS number and the IVR that Go hosts to get real-time bus information. I'm a big believer in open data and preventing lock-in to proprietary platforms. So the specific question is, are there plans to open up real-time bus location information to developers like the trains have been? And can you speak to whether you have an open data policy more generally?
Mark.
So I think, first of all, I'll take the question from a customer point of view. So I think you're absolutely on the money. You talked about the SMS, where's my bus? So that just obviously launched. At the moment, we're going through a process of sort of looking at our kind of digital ecosystem and particularly how we communicate. So at this point, we are in that analysis of what do we need to change moving forward. But we definitely understand that many of our riders want real-time information, whether it be bus, whether it be train. So at this point, we know that we're feeding API into other folks' offerings like Transit app. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but yeah, it's definitely on the roadmap for us to consider.
But Mark, just the general gist of the question about we haven't got a preference for proprietary ownership of our bus, where buses are. So we are very much in the same space of having anyone that wants to use it in an app for access.
And that happens today,
yeah.
Okay, that differs slightly from what I'm told, but I can follow up by email.
I can follow up with you at the end of this.
Yeah, because like I said, in the last 2.5 years, really the only app since the service started is the Transit app and a couple other smaller, more niche ones. Whereas Go Train information, it's like, hey everybody, come use our data, develop your own apps, do what you want. But buses, it's like, well, contact us, we'll do it by email. There doesn't seem to be a general
See,
open policy.
Well, I see where you're coming from.
Yeah.
I see where you're coming from. So there's something to discuss there, because I'm not going to. We have no difficulty with bus information. So thanks for flagging that up. Can you pursue that with Mark?
Absolutely.
Directly. Go mark.childs.
Sure. Thanks.
Tyson, thanks for that question. Do we have any questions from folks watching online? So this is again coming from online. This is from Hayden. Is the Kitchener GO station going to move towards King Street for connection with ION?
That's an interesting one.
So I can try to start. I do know that we've had lots of discussions with the region of Waterloo around the location of the site right at Victoria and King, which is the proposed site for a hub which would integrate, and it would be the ideal intersection between the GO station and the ION LRT. The long-term plan is to shift the GO station closer towards King so that we would have a better interconnection, and that's something that the region has been working themselves with the private sector in the redevelopment. It is an ideal transit-oriented development site, and we would be keen to kind of work with the region more closely to advance that. But it's an ideal TOD, and we would support that relocation. And so that's part of the discussions that are going on now.
Do you want to just talk a little bit more about what transit-oriented development is?
I'd be happy to, Jamie. Transit-oriented development. So we all understand that where the interchange between rapid transit happens is huge opportunity for people moving through in a seamless way. It's also a huge opportunity for development insofar as mixed use, residential, commercial. It's also a huge opportunity to generate trips onto our system, and they're the gateway into the network. It reduces the number of actual travel trips, so when people have to travel shorter distances to get from their home to work. And for us, in December of this year, we initiated our transit-oriented development market-driven strategy. What that means is we will now work with the development industry insofar as exchange of rights or commercial arrangements and business arrangements with the private sector to enable us to bring either new stations into fruition or look at our existing stations and any upgrades or changes that we would initially have planned on our books. We would work with the private sector as the market demand drives in order to bring more projects online sooner.
And if I can translate exactly what Leslie has just said, just into dollar signs, because this is what matters, dollar signs. Taxpayers that would have funded stations, we have at least two schemes out there. One of them have been publicly announced, which is Mimico Station, where the private sector picked up on these two schemes. It's around 158 million that taxpayers do not have to pay, but which we get developers to pay. And so this is very real for us. The cost to build a new station is pretty expensive. And when you can integrate it, like Leslie says, you integrate it with a place where people can live, they can work, they can play, so you get mixed use. And by the way, there's a station at the bottom floor as well. Then all of a sudden, there's an interest for a developer to take on that development, build the station, and build the station for a significantly reduced cost, or build it for free for us as the province to take on. So it's a very real strategy. It's all aimed at reducing the burden on taxpayers.
Hayden, thanks for that question, and thanks for watching online. Anyone else at the microphone, sir?
Hi there. Most of my question comment have been addressed with the Route 30 and sort of using buses to build service in the region. I see it more as a stopgap measure between now and that year-ish that you're projecting for possible changes. And I think one of the challenging things is to hear that you're focusing on weekdays, and unfortunately, I don't own a car, so I don't magically own a car on a Saturday. So if there's an opportunity to have that, and one other thing that I was wondering if you have looked into is Cambridge to Aldershot service on the bus. It's something that I hear about from colleagues at work who have families, who go to the Jays game, who they wouldn't use it for commuting necessarily, but it's something that they talk about, and it's something that they would use to get to Toronto because they don't want to drive in Toronto. So.
It's similar to the previous question about connecting Cambridge round through on Highway 6. So I think it's a market that we will investigate. As Greg is saying, we look into it, not only just weekday, but off-peak and weekends to see whether or not that's a good idea. I think the other thing I might just add in the conversation is when we think about how we're developing our network, we're also working with other private sector on smaller, not only always large coach buses, but what are other products that we can offer, whether it's shuttles or, we have a great partnership going on with Uber in downtown Toronto. So there's other mechanisms that scale up or scale down. It doesn't always have to be a 40-seater coach or double-decker bus.
Thank you.
Anything else to add, Greg? Okay, good. Another question from the mic, sir.
Hi, my name's Abhishek. I've been living in city of Kitchener for 10 plus years now. And I used to work for a local employer in the financial sector up until about 3 years ago. I now work for an employer in Toronto. And I changed my jobs primarily for career advancement. So I just wanted to give that background from a journey purpose that you talked about earlier. And I also want to touch upon, and I will get to my question in a second, I also want to touch upon your previous comment about the Melton Line and how it's at capacity, and if there's any demand that gets, any capacity that gets freed up will likely be absorbed by the Melton Line. So when I normally commute to Toronto, I would drive to Melton and then catch the train from there, as opposed to taking the train from Kitchener. And I'm not alone in that because I do see a lot of familiar faces, familiar license plates, etc. So there's a lot of individuals that are doing that, potentially adding to that demand on the Melton Line. However, on days when driving conditions are poor, the train from Kitchener to Toronto actually takes less time than driving to Melton and taking the train from there. So some of that demand that you're seeing in the Melton Line could possibly be, is actually from individuals living in the Waterloo region that are trying to save that 20 minutes each way, and 45 minutes at the end of the day can be a significant saving. So there's a lot of discussion around all-day two-way service, which I think a lot of people would really like. My question to you is, as part of that discussion, is there consideration for a shorter journey duration?
The shorter duration from Kitchener, because you were going
Kitchener
along
to
a path
Toronto,
Kitchener
to Toronto and back, yeah.
Absolutely, because today it's 2 hours and 5 minutes. That's unacceptable. And as Phil had said, when we took over ownership of the corridor in late October, we started making changes right away. We got approval to spend up to $75 million. We're probably going to need a little more, just tipping Phil off on that. But for every time we make a positive change, we're moving what we call in the industry a slow order. So a slow order is a uninvested...
A speed limit.
Yeah, so it's usually work that needs to be done that hasn't been done, and what railways do is they lower the speed so they don't do the work necessarily, as long as it stays safe. So we're going back and we're fixing all those things. So there's temporary and permanent slow orders, and the gentleman from CP would recognize those terms. And my biggest issue, to be honest with you, are the 33 level crossings between Georgetown and Kitchener. That they're legacy crossings. They've been there since Ontario was created in a grid format, and everybody created these roads crossing each other. And all of a sudden now we have to upgrade 33 level crossings when frankly a bunch of them shouldn't exist. So we need the collaboration with the municipalities to actually take a look at every one of those and start closing the ones that aren't relevant anymore. That's all going to increase speed. So my rule of thumb is we and this is not perfect, but we invest $5 million to save 2 minutes in transit time. So my team knows my target is to get from 120 minutes down to 90 minutes as quickly as possible and as quickly as the investment will allow. So in no way should you interpret the schedule to be an acceptance on our part on what the proper speed is, but it is what it is until such time as we invest in making it better.
Thank you.
Good. Thanks for your question. Another question from the mic, sir?
Hi, my name is Sharif. Thanks for coming again.
Thank you.
So I read plans about adding 3 more stops to the line, one between Malton and Etobicoke North, one between Weston and Malton, Etobicoke North, and one between Bloor and Union. So obviously these 3 additional stops is going to make the trip slower because the trains have to decelerate and stop. And so are we looking at 2 hours and 15 minutes each way before it gets better and you get to the track speeding?
So I think you're referring, we did a whole extensive study over the last several years looking at, with the introduction of new service throughout the whole network, we are generating more capacity, and we're also passing through some fairly urban areas where we know there's a high demand for our service. So we studied a number of locations where we thought whether they would be suitable to add a station that creates benefit to the community, at the same time enables us to continue to add service without a detriment to the whole network. And it's a very carefully balanced kind of exercise to understand, because of course you're correct, the more stops you add in, you slow down. But at the same time, the combination of the new technology, so as we move to electric service, we will be able to accelerate and decelerate trains more quickly, which means you can fit more, you can get more speed out of the same distance. So that work has been underway. We've identified 12 locations that we think are suitable for station additions, new stations. So those are the ones that you're talking about. Breslau is one way out on this end of the corridor, and the others are St. Clair West, and I think there's another one, which is the other one, West. Anyway, there's a number. There's 12. Innisfil, that's going on Barrie, though. Yeah. Anyway, what I was going to say is that I mentioned how we have now moved to a transit-oriented, market-driven strategy, which means we are approaching those locations as an opportunity to work jointly with the private sector and for looking for really the development industry to pay for those stations to be incorporated into our network. So we have done the analysis to ensure that, in fact, when we add in a station, it's not to the detriment of someone at the end of the line, because the time is improved.
But Sharif, just adding to your point, as Leslie says, you're 100% right. Adding a station, so closer to Toronto that we add a station, the worse the impact, because the train is full of everyone that's joined the train up to that point. But here's the thing. Currently, we have about 5 cards in our hand we play with. That's the 5 services from Kitchener. This is why it's so important to ramp up the number of services. So say we get to the stage where we have like 12 and 15 services a day. Then what we'll do is we'll do the same as express running. And we won't, the idea that we stop any train that runs at every station is sort of a very old-fashioned idea, which we have discarded. And so then you'll be able to, what we'll do is we'll say, well, some of these stations service every half an hour would be pretty decent. And so instead of having 10 stops along the line, we'll have only 4 stops or 5 stops along the line, and they stop every half an hour, but everyone gets in quick because there's only 5 stops on the line. Or some stops will fill the train up like we do with a 1650 express service. You'll fill it up and you run fast to where the first big chunks of people get off, and then you'll start to drop people gradually. And when you come in, you can do the same. Fill the train up, and then when the train is full, you don't stop anymore. You just run in fast, run it out for a little bit in the counter peak to 3 or 4 stations out, pick up people and run it back into the city. So there are many types of logistical moves with train services that we're not yet doing because we haven't got 15 cars in our hand. We've got 5. We had 4 till January.
There were only 2 when I started working in Toronto.
Yeah,
in 2016.
So as we get to higher frequency of services, we have so many more options to do the train plan in a way which is which maximizes the capacity for everyone.
Thank you.
It's a good question. Thank you very much.
Sharif, thanks for that. Peter, do we have another question from the live stream? Just want to tap into people who may be watching online.
That's a good one.
Have we talked about Breslau?
Not
Talk
yet.
about Breslau?
Let's
Okay.
talk about Breslau.
This is coming from Jim. Are you planning to add a stop at Breslau?
So I mentioned Breslau. Breslau was one of the 12 that we identified as a high potential station as part of our expansion program. We will be taking this, as I mentioned, a market-driven approach to it. We are in discussions with the landowners in and around the station. They've been very positive conversations, so we're actually looking forward to having moving that location forward as quickly as we can.
Great. Jim, thanks for that.
So yes, there will be a station at Breslau.
If developers invest
If developers
if
come
developers
forward.
invest in it.
That's right. And so far, so good.
Next question at the mic, sir.
Hello, my name is Tabadaneme, and actually my two questions have been stolen away, but not really stolen, but asked already. One of them was with regards to the Breslau station, and the second one, Leslie, you already alluded to about transit-oriented developments for funding your stations and inviting third parties. Now, I spoke with some Metrolinx staff sometime earlier this month. No, this month is too early. That was the end of last month, sorry. And I was made to understand that the third parties were like even municipalities could pay for it, not just.
That's correct. That's correct.
Yeah. So my question to you is, what happens if you do not have someone to sponsor the station? Say, for example, Breslau. How does that affect your plan?
Well, it won't. It'll get built when the market demands it. So if it doesn't. If that approach isn't work, but say a municipality really wants to have it there for all different other reasons in addition to transit, then that would be their sort of role in advancing it. But the way we're approaching it is we won't put it there unless there's the ability for a third party to come forward to pay for it.
And also in giving that answer, let's just keep in mind.
Yeah,
the government, the processes between local government and provincial government and funding choices for transit and different funding schemes at federal level, and it's PTIFs and CSIFs and all of these sort of acronyms. People are really mature. The municipalities in the region itself, very mature, good transit people that'll know how to take something that's part of an economic plan or a growth plan and bring it to the provincial level. In the end, keep in mind what we as Metrolinx do. Very, very, very important. We do not get involved in politics. We just get involved in facts. We advise what's the right thing. We drive our operations as hard as possible. And we try to come with a strategy on how to do stuff. In the end, if funding can be found by the right engagement at provincial level, federal level, local level, things get funded. So everything we've said is sort of the framework that we want to work with. And the framework is there's an incredible amount of interest from developers that have an aligned interest with us to build developments on transit systems because it's in their interest. Now, sometimes it could be that there's not a developer interest. Then what we are saying is what other funds are available. Let's local government together with provincial government, together the federal government, explore that. And form an opinion. But in the end, what we'll recommend is look for developer interest in these transit schemes. But I just want to say, we may make it sound too simple. We don't intend to do that. We want to give justice to the great work that the region of Waterloo and other local municipalities do to understand where to get funding.
Maybe Phil, I could just also add, the thing about a market-driven strategy is the land value generally, when the transit is about to be introduced or is introduced, continues to rise. And so the timing of when it's right for the investment, whether it's a third party as a municipality or the private sector, that will balance out the ability to drive. So there are some locations, not every location on our network is a high prime, high value. Some in 10 years or 5 years may be more so, and the market will push it. So we get to play with that over time and in the immediate.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll just follow up with the last question. With regards to, I know you've talked a lot about your cost-benefit approach and how you guys come up with facts and you don't worry about the politics. But with regards to, say, like Waterloo, we've seen a lot of questions here. There was some sort of a latent demand, hidden demand, which is not being, I think it's not being captured as part of your cost-benefit approach. So how do you go about that? Because, for example, like Pearson Airport right now is getting packed, and there's always been that talk about, we're looking at our own airport over here, and if that airport can be developed, if we have a good train service which runs along the Kitchener line, that's an alternative, but that will not really get, is it a cat before the horse, or the horse before the cat? And
no, you're thinking, it's a fantastic question. Your thinking is right. The only thing I just tweak ever so slightly, you're saying our cost-benefit analysis doesn't capture latent demand. It most surely does. The fact that we haven't got the service developed yet doesn't mean we don't know that there's latent demand. Our challenge, quite bluntly, is to make sure we get the best value for money. Now, we took 6 or 7 months last year to negotiate with CN. That was good value for money. We freed up around 4 billion that we now don't have to invest in a freight bypass that would have taken even longer to get services here. We found the quickest way to get services to Kitchener. In the process, saved 4 billion. That allows the government to invest the 4 billion by their judgment in either schools, hospitals, or more transit. And I think that's what we're here to do. So sometimes it takes a little bit of time, but it was so much time well spent to do that. And I have to say, there's latent demand on every corridor we've got. Every service, we increased our number of services by 22% last year, our passenger kilometers of services we run. And the uptake on those services have been huge. The latent demand is everywhere.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question. We'll take another question from the mic, and while we're doing that, Peter, find a question for Matt. Matt's been sitting there for more than an hour, and he's chomping at the bit. So maybe you can find one for Matt after the question from the audience.
Just a quick comment. Greg has been my boss for the past over 7 years. I just retired last October after almost 49 years service at GO Transit. My question is, I'll put the question at the end. The first comment I have to make is that I find that right now GO Transit is duplicating service so much that it's costing us a lot of money, which is not being used properly. Like, for example, take Hamilton. Hamilton is an express bus every hour to downtown Toronto, even though the train runs from Aldershot all the way downtown Toronto. You have a station at Oriole, at Leslie and Shepherd, which is within 5 minutes from the subway station at Leslie and Shepherd, which you have a parking lot which is being maintained by GO Transit, which is being used by TTC patrons that park there and walk over to the subway because they have to pay for their parking. That's where you need to start saving money so we can have better service in Kitchener. The two first questions from this gentleman and this gentleman.
Can I just say, what a great comment.
That's right.
And you're right.
And the first two questions were a topic that's been going around Cambridge for the past 20 years. I used to do Cambridge when there used to be Esper, Preston, and Galt. That's how far back I go, to the 80s. The service back then was still being questioned. Why can't we bring it out of Milton? Milton GO train used to be stored in Campbellton, which is less than 8 kilometers from Cambridge, 9 kilometers by train track. So therefore, that's where you could save the money. My question is, why do the seats on the GO train have to be so uncomfortable? Anybody that's traveled on trains anywhere else, they're about the worst seats there is.
The new ones are pretty good.
Good. Great.
Greg, why are the
But I know what you're going to say. You're going to say we don't have enough money.
Yeah.
I find them comfortable. I bring my own padding, so it doesn't matter.
Right.
But they are uncomfortable. And you know what? They are the product of focus groups and all kinds of analytics. But we did get that feedback from more than one place. So we actually put a bunch of new seat designs in the York Concourse at Union Station and ask people to try them and give them comments. And we'll take their feedback and come back with a newer design on the seats, and we'll do a gradual change out of the seats that, frankly, are pretty firm.
Yes.
So,
And so what I can say in Europe, what we've seen in Europe, fire retardancy legislation has really taken all of the fun out of seats, and seats have become really so chemically processed and so dense in terms of its material, and so we are looking at, and if we need to replace those, we will.
And one quick follow-up is that the people in Hamilton, when I used to drive the bus from Hamilton to downtown Toronto, used to tell me that's why they take the bus, because the trains are too uncomfortable. In the bus, you can lay back and you have a snooze, you can relax, but the trains, they're just the most uncomfortable seats, especially if you're sitting across from somebody that is tall, and you're tall, and your knees are intertwined between each other, because there's only that much room between the seats. Well, thank you very much for coming.
I hear you. And congratulations, 49 years in the industry.
Yes, yes.
Good for you.
It's
Why don't
been
you come back?
A good ride.
Come on back.
No, I'm not coming back. No, because this was my 4th time. So my wife says you're not going back again.
So coming back to your question on the services, we have a bus strategy review. Our services that we've introduced to Hamilton, it is about removing the duplication at the right speed so that we can move to using the bus resources we've got to service other routes. But your comment on the duplicate service is 100% accurate, and that's part of what we're looking at.
Just make one more comment. The night that I registered to come here was the 2-year anniversary of that lady that got killed at Union Station.
Right.
As a bus driver, that should never have happened.
Agreed.
Right? And because you guys started with this meeting with safety, while I was doing my job, because I was in disability, of cleaning a bus with 47 years experience, I listened on the radio when this happened. And I said to myself, why couldn't I have been down there with a vest to help the people instead of cleaning a bus? So that's where you need to start looking at different things like that to make this service better and great the way it was supposed to be in 1967 when it started.
Fantastic.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Much appreciated.
Great. Peter, did you find a question for Matt?
No.
Okay,
No?
go Matt.
Go Matt. So this is coming from Doug, and so this was a question that came to us from prior to this evening's event. So Matt, what is the status of Electrified Regional Express Rail? So the question is, all-day 15-minute two-way GO rail service to the suburbs and cities surrounding Toronto is predicated on electrification of major portions of the GO network. Much work has been done laying the groundwork. Has the new provincial government given any indication of its position towards electrification?
I'm not sure this one's for me. This one might be for Phil. But no, you're 100% right. The upgrade of the GO network does definitely rely on a change to the way that we haul the trains around the network, whether that be electrification or some other form of a change in the way that we power. But yeah, so we're working our way through initial designs and concept designs and starting through our procurement process to look at teaming with the market in a very significant and groundbreaking way to assess how we can deliver the electrification of this network over the next 5 to 6 years. And I might let Phil talk about how the government feels about it.
So what's the benefits of electrification?
Phil, do you want to?
Yeah. So the real benefit of electrification is it's got a relatively small benefit that's environmental, and if you quantify, it's around 330 million over 35 years, which is relatively small. But then electrification has the huge benefit in the sense that electric traction is less expensive. Think of a diesel engine. It's got all of gearboxes and moving parts and pistons and pipes, and it's all got that stuff in. But electric traction is a traction motor with magnets and change the field orientation, and you brake and it's either in generator mode, then you brake, or it's either motor mode, then you are having positive traction. So it's much cheaper to maintain, much cheaper to run, but more than that, it accelerates faster and it brakes faster. And some of you may know, if you're electrical engineers, that when you brake an electric train, what the train actually does is you change the polarization on the motor, And and that slows the train down, and the motor then runs as a generator and charges your batteries up and saves energy and reduces the energy that you need across the rest of the network. So it's about 20% cheaper in real power consumption. It's called regenerative braking. And so this just makes it cheaper to run, and the faster running and faster stopping means journey times are shorter, which was Sharif's question earlier. And so the journey times are shorter, and the shorter journey times, the benefit of that over the 60 years is $35 billion. So if you think of the comparison, the environmental benefits is $330 million, and the journey time benefits is $35 billion. So it's about 100 times as much. But so that's where the biggest benefits of electrification is. Now, what is interesting today, and we shared this with members of the cabinet today, and people are really switched on to the fact that this is a big change for Go, and the key thing about electrification though is we're not specifying that it should be overhead catenary. It can be hydrogen fuel cells. It can be whatever the bidders want to bid. But our way of going to market on this is allowing bidders to come with solutions that they may think is best.
Great. Folks, we've got about 10 more minutes as part of our formal event. Sir?
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you for coming out here. It's been really informative. My name is Brian Doucette. I've got a question about a destination that we haven't really talked about too much, and that is Pearson Airport. And by extension, perhaps also linking to downtown Toronto. Currently, we've got a few trains, obviously, that we can connect with the Up Express. We've got, I think, 4 Greyhound buses that go direct to Pearson a day. And if we want to take anything but our own cars, it costs about $100 each way. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are about an express bus while we're waiting for these all-day trains to come between Kitchener-Waterloo and Pearson, which not only allows us to connect with the airport, but also with the Up Express and the TTC as well. And then related to that, because I mentioned Greyhound, I'm just curious, are there any agreements or arrangements? Because obviously Greyhound does this Kitchener to Toronto run. It's not particularly glamorous or pleasant to ride, in my opinion. But are there any arrangements that you have with Greyhound that maybe limit the ability to, say, run an hourly off-peak bus service from downtown Kitchener to downtown Toronto Express?
So first, let me start with the airport. The hub that is Pearson is a significant employment zone. It is a travel destination, and so we have been working very closely with the Greater Toronto Airport Authority on their concept of a regional transit hub that integrates all modes of transit, local transit, our rail corridor, the Up Express, bus rapid transit, light rapid transit. There's a lot of work on the idea of that hub being a central nexus that enables the rest of the region to be connected. So that is actually a big piece of work. The airport folks refer to it as Union Station West or Union Station North, and it truly will transform the way where the center of gravity of the region is. So that is work that is active. We're working very, very closely with the GTA and the municipalities. With respect to the idea of a more speedier bus service between the airport and Kitchener, I think in many respects, like the comment Greg made earlier about potential markets, I think Mark is looking through his analytics and Greg through the kind of operating service plan about what opportunities exist there. With regards to Greyhound, and I'll get Greg to add in, I mean, we have ongoing conversations with Greyhound. In fact, one of the discussions with Greyhound has to do with the new bus terminal that will be built right adjacent east of Union Station that will have the ability to have not only GO buses, but other coach buses. But maybe, Greg, you can speak to other relationships with Greyhound.
Sure. So we have an ongoing relationship with both Greyhound, Coach Canada, and other, there's not too many other major intercity bus carriers. They're in a tough market, as you've probably read in the media. Greyhound has demarketed Western Canada, if you will. I don't think there's any intention to do that in Eastern Canada. I think it's profitable for them to do. But we do talk to them. We have to be a little bit careful. Public sector can't intervene and take a private sector market away. That causes consternation amongst the private sector. But we just have to handle that carefully. But there's reasons why they're backing away from certain quarters. If they don't make money, we're not prepared necessarily to step in and not make money also. So we have to do everything fairly surgically as to what makes sense. Again, we are stewards of the tax dollar in Ontario, and we have to make good, smart business decisions. But we do have an ongoing relationship with them. As Leslie said, we're 99% through a negotiating agreement with them for their access to our downtown bus terminal, which gets them out of the Elizabeth Terminal downtown Toronto. But we actually did step in to serve Laurier and Waterloo in terms of GO bus supply, because the inner city market wasn't doing it well enough, and there was a lot of demand for us to step in, and so we did, and it's been very good. We see our students as really tomorrow's full-time customers, and so that's a good business for us to be in. I don't know if that covers all your questions about inner city.
That's great. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks. Final question, sir.
Hi, my name is Corey Albrecht. I'm from Kitchener. Like many people have said, thank you for coming to Kitchener to do this. We really appreciate it. You've talked about the business case for the various things that you're trying to do. But one thing we know from urban planning is that when you increase service, that's one of the best ways to increase ridership because it attracts people. How does that figure into your business cases rather than a reactive model that is often the first thing that pops to mind when people hear business case? Thank you.
So I will start. So without going to a lengthy description of our business case methodology, ridership is one of the key drivers in terms of our measures that we quantify. So the ability of a project and different options of a project, and we optioneer and we look at different scenarios, and to determine using our data of Transportation for Tomorrow survey, our modeling, which is integrated with land use, to forecast. So we know what is today, to forecast out how the intervention of a transit project or service will do, and that we quantify into if it's new riders getting out of cars, that has a value of kilometers traveled. So then we can put a dollar value to that, and that gets integrated in the benefits and divided by the cost to intervene the infrastructure, and that's one aspect of our benefit cost ratio. There are many other benefits that we quantify, so we do that from a planning standpoint and a strategic case. We do the economic case, which is the impact of the transit project to the economy generally, the financial case, it's around the cost, and then we do an evaluation of the deliverability. So how difficult or challenging is it? And we wrap that up as a mechanism to try and evaluate. So ridership is one of the key indicators and measures for us. And there was a question earlier about latent ridership. So we try to use enough data that we have to forecast. So we know what we have and the trajectories. And so that we could spend a lot more time going into the details of it, but it is very critical to how we evaluate.
If I can add a little bit to that. Leslie and the team are fantastic planners, and they will identify from so many indicators where there's potential opportunities. But one of the things I've seen in rail is build it and they will come. Yeah. And I'll never forget, when I was in Ireland as a deputy CEO in Ireland, we built a line between Sligo on the west coast and Dublin. And people say, well, who's going to use that? Sligo is relatively small as a city. The use was amazing. The number of people that took it up once it was there, and it provided a service at a better frequency. There was originally the frequency was one train every 4 hours, and we increased it to an hourly service. And the use was amazing. So everything Leslie has described is the really powerful thinking that she and her team puts into figuring out sort of where are the corridors, what are the type of stops, where should it be. But when I said earlier, last year we increased our services by 22.6%. We haven't picked up 22.6% occupation. We grew our services by that, basically on the same philosophy. Most of that service growth was in off-peak services on Lakeshore West and Lakeshore East. And it's a build it and they will come strategy. So in time, it takes word of mouth for people to really, people watch telly. They don't believe what they see on the telly. We advertise catch a train service. They don't believe that so much. They'll listen when they're at the barbecue in the pub and listen to their friends or the Leafs game, and they'll oh yeah, I'm taking the train. Oh yes, maybe I'll try it next time. You know, that's word of mouth is really, really powerful. So it takes time to build service like that. And what we are just trying to do, and I think hopefully we explained that this evening, is we're trying to build capacity as quickly as possible to get as much as possible growth in our services.
Ladies and gentlemen, that brings the town hall to a close. Thank you very, very much for a fantastic discussion and evening with you tonight. I'd like to thank some folks at Communitech. Again, fantastic facility here you've got, and thank you for hosting us here. Much appreciated. I want to thank all the folks from Connect the Corridor. We had a terrific luncheon with you folks today and had a really good conversation, and want to continue on with much more of those. So thank you very much for that. At the outset, I said that your feedback on our services and our projects is welcome, and answers to all the questions that you've posed tonight and you've submitted that we didn't get to will be posted online over the next couple of weeks. Please register on Metrolinx Engage to be notified of future Metrolinx events. Even though the next one may not be in Kitchener, but you're more than welcome to join us online, and you'll see how we did take some questions certainly from online tonight. So thank you very much. Good night, and please get home safely.
Thank you very much, everyone.